So by means of the path of release, the Lama introduces you to and you identify the noumenal foundational clear light, the intrinsic awareness. And then the second key, I'm always forgetting the author of the poem. Does anyone know it?
Patrul Rinpoche.
Patrul Rinpoche. As I mentioned before, they had somebody draw up an imaginary painting, a drawing of him, and they had some fat Lama. And can you imagine the fat Lama going, in his story, he wanted to escape all of his students, so he went around and took a job as a sweeper in a hotel. And, so he was cleaning urine pots and so forth. So can you imagine some fat slob Lama being accepted as, someone who emptied urine pots and whereas on the internet, I'm so sorry I didn't copy that, they had a picture of him. I don't know, is it pretended or what? But someone who really looked as if he could pass for, anybody, any jerk person you could hire that way. And really, and anybody you could pass on the street and just think, oh, that's a nobody. And so the woman hired him, and he was cleaning urine pots. You have to have a place to piss in at night. You're not going to go outside and take a piss. And he's a sweeper. And then when when the students finally caught up with him, she was, super embarrassed. And as I remember, she ran away in embarrassment. So, and the picture they had, you see, I forget what his dates are. Can you look up his dates? Sorry. Photographs go way back. We have photographs of Lincoln.
1808
Yeah.
till 1887.
Yeah, not totally impossible. So, but anyway, a little bit early, huh? Especially in Tibet. But somebody wrote me the other day and said, "Could you help me with information about basketball being introduced into Tibet?" And
Oh God.
yeah, and what they're talking about is basketball nowadays being introduced. And I said, you've got to go back to the 1930s. And the person had no idea that there were basketball courts in Tibet in the 1930s. And I said, I don't know how you're going to confirm that there were basketball courts in Tibet. People were playing basketball in Tibet in the 1930s. So I checked with a friend who might know, and actually he dug up the confirmation. So it's like that. People think Tibet was totally isolated. They couldn't possibly have any interest in basketball until, the 2000s. Anyway, like that. But anyway, I like that picture of the guy, thin guy, a little bit twisted nose or something. Anyway. So, you sustain its continuum, whereby, so then as we were saying last time, that's not the royal we, I'm talking about the group of us were saying, in order to sustain the continuum, you need the third key. Whose third key? Patrul, Ogyen, Jigme, Chirkyombo. The third key, as in his poem, the Dalai Lama says that that poem was a poem from inspiration. From the long, the expanse of reality. Then there's testimony to that in the text. So, in order to sustain the continuum of your recognition, of your identification, of your getting a hold of the noumenal foundational clear light, it's a whole lot of words, right? But when you recognize it, there's not a whole lot of words. So then in order to be able to sustain the continuum, you need the third key, which is the three types of the three ways that conceptuality dissolves. So that's just a review of last time. Now, at that time, you see, when familiarization gels, what's happening? The operation of the sense consciousnesses retracts, withdraws into the mental consciousness. Now this is exactly what Nyingma then says in his Tantric Salam, his Tantric Grounds and Paths. This is just a simple statement. You're not paying attention with your senses. You're involved with your mental consciousness, with this which you have identified. So, it's like being distracted, so to speak, wound up, involved with music. That you're listening to with your ear consciousness, and you're not paying attention. So you crash your car into, some other car, right? Or you're paying attention to your iPhone because you're texting, right? Literally. So you don't even hear the person in the back seat who says, "Look out for that car you're going to smash into." Literally, you don't hear it. There's no more complex than that. And that's why Khetsun Sangpo gives this very simple example. Like when you fall to sleep, the five sense consciousnesses disappear. When it says cease, it doesn't mean they don't exist anymore. It just means they stop. And he qualifies it, don't involve itself, conceptuality doesn't involve itself much in external objects. Why? Because, if somebody calls your name, you most usually wake up. the Gomang abbot wasn't supposed to come last time he came. But the person who was hosting him says, "Oh, Jeffrey wants to see you today." So he has to come here because my whole setup is here. So he came to the door and the doorbell was ringing. And my door was closed. But, you know, if my sleep was light, I would have heard it. Fortunately, my husband's mother heard it and let him in. I woke up after 10 minutes and I looked over at the front door and he was standing inside the door, the abbot of Gomang College. Okay, so all these things dissolve. It's really great what's said here. You know, he's giving a psychological description. At this point, you know, when you pay attention to this which you've found, at this point, the consciousnesses of the 8 collections have been entirely reversed, ceased. But there's another word again. So in my translation scheme, I think if I was translating in public, I might try to make it easier, and wouldn't have a different word for all of these, you know, ceased, withdraw, reversed. But that's, you know, in writing, it's very important to have the richness of the original vocabulary. And he says, and are non-existent. But non-existent doesn't mean they won't occur again. Nevertheless, self-arisen clear light wisdom itself the effulgence. I was wondering if dung anyway, the effulgence of noumenal intrinsic awareness now most translators, almost all translators I think nowadays say noumenal awareness. They want to save the word awareness, like awareness meaning just bare awareness. It's okay. Every one of these translation terms has its own impact. Internal. And then he says more about it because he knew that, what's her name that just asked that question? Internal. He knew she was going to ask a question, so he said some more about it. Internal, manifestly enlightened clear light, and then he put this in for her. Exemplified by space, sky. Not just, I mean, one way it's space. The absence of obstructive contact. You know, space, the absence of obstructive contact, is used as an example to give us some hint of what clear light is like. In another way, it's sky. And people meditate on sky to get this in the mind, to help to open up the mind. But it isn't just sky. And then Venerable wants to say, well, what else is it if it's not just sky? She asks too much. So then he answers, and he says, devoid of the three polluting conditions. What are they? Moonlight, sunlight, and darkness. And she answers, I already know that. I've already heard that. I want to hear something more. But now it's very interesting. Look, this is the vocabulary, isn't it, that we associate with Guhya Samaja. Moonlight is the vivid white appearance. And it is. He doesn't mean anything else. Three polluting conditions. Khetsun was going to explain. But the three polluting conditions. What pollutes the sky? Now, of course, people think of all sorts of things, smoke and blah, 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 and some chemicals and blah, blah, blah. But the three polluting conditions are moonlight. You think I never thought of moonlight as a polluting condition. Sunlight. I never thought of sunlight as a polluting condition. Darkness. Well, maybe. Maybe darkness is a polluting condition. But wow. These are the three polluting conditions. These are the three things that keep us from seeing the natural effulgence, the natural tone, the natural face of the sky. What does the sky look like? Remember I said I was out on the Ganga, with the people from Harvard and actually also the United States Army, because this is the group they had together to study Dumo, the inner heat generated by the yogis we're going to test.
U.S. Army?
Yeah. Oh, the United States Army is into everything. So the person, the guy from Harvard had along with us, he was actually from the Army. And so anyway, of course we had to have a pleasure trip on the Ganga. And the time to go out on the Ganga was pre-dawn, not pre-sunrise, pre-dawn, the black of night. And I, being who I was, lay down on the boat. It was all very quiet and just looking up into darkness. And, there's nothing, just darkness. And then dawn came. And this color of dawn, tone of dawn, was right down to my face. So the dawn sky I saw right down to my face. So this on the Ganga is really something. So anyway, what can I say? Not sunrise. First light, so to speak, but it's not first light going out and looking. It's first light. And It's not hard to say. Anyway. So, no moonlight, no sunlight, no darkness. So, the example, so you see, that's sky. There's sky, space, whatever. But that's not the example of space, which is uncompounded space, the absence of obstructive contact. That's a different example. This is sky. Is identified. But that's just an example. So that's probably, Venerable, by way of an example, a good answer. A good, one of many good answers to your question. Is identified due to earlier familiarization. What is the earlier familiarization? What was given just above. When by means of the path of release you are introduced to and identify the noumenal foundational clear light or mode of abiding, that means you got the pointing out instruction. You can read, I didn't read Dan Brown's book, but his book must be a lot about that. You know, he has teamed up with a fellow who was a Gelugpa Drugu from Goma. Tulku, but Drugu. Drul means emanate. Gu means body. Comes into English as Tulku, which is a bit ridiculous, but who's going to say Drugu? You know, it's a sound that doesn't appear in English. You know, isn't readily copied. Tulku. That I met decades ago. He was a student of my, you know, his picture we always have here. He's a student, and he has, you know, written down teachings from him that, in fact, he wanted me to translate and blah blah for him. I met him. He came to Vancouver when Dan was there. So I met him again. And this Tulku became, His Holiness advised him to learn Sanskrit, which he did. And then, I forget his story, but he ended up studying and practicing Nyingma and has become a Nyingma Lama, which happens to a number of Gelugpa teachers, lamas. I practice both. And Dan has tremendous respect for him. And Ginen Lotre, the Ngao Langden's student, who came to Wisconsin, where Ngao Langden was, and that's where I met him, and then studied with him in Hamburg, and then Ginen Lotre came to Virginia, where he taught what ended up as the book Walking Through Walls, and then was renamed Calm Abiding and Special Insight, because nobody could figure out what a book called Walking Through Walls was about. Or not too many could figure it out. Anyway, Dan has tremendous respect for him. And as Dan says, when somebody through Dan's own teaching advances enough, he moves them on to this Lama. So devoid of the three polluting conditions. So you see, in Guhya Samaja, what is enlightenment? Enlightenment is the manifestation of the fundamental innate mind of clear light, which means the three polluting conditions have disappeared. So it's so interesting that Mipam Gyatsho describes the path of release, the culmination of it, and with the internal manifestly enlightened clear light, as exemplified by space devoid of the three polluting conditions. These three polluting conditions are also described are given the names used for them in Tsongkhapa's great exposition of secret mantra as sattva, rajas, and tamas, which are the terms in Sankhya, in the non-Buddhist Sankhya system. Is identified due to what?
Why would you use those names?
Because they appear even in Indian Buddhist texts. So you see, this is the white, the red or orange, and the black. You see, tamas is dark, rajas is active in red. I don't know about orange, but and sattva is white. It's very interesting. So, and what Khetsun Sangpo is saying is that are identified due to earlier familiarization. And you see, in the second and third keys, one is sustaining what you've identified continually. Sustain means continually. How? Through learning to cause, to make, to bring about the disappearance of conceptuality. And Patrul, Ogyen, Jigme, Triki Ombo details three types of the appearance and disappearance of conceptuality. Then, as Khetsun Sangpo then says at the end of the next paragraph of Khetsun Sangpo, all of our usual consciousnesses in their entirety disappear totally and do not exist. Now that doesn't mean do not exist forever, unless you achieve Buddhahood. Do not exist either temporarily or forever. Now, both in Nyingma and in Gelug, the term conceptuality can be used in a very strict sense, narrow sense, or in a very broad sense. And in the broad sense, even non-conceptual consciousnesses like an eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, and body consciousness. It's very important when using these terms, eye consciousness, ear consciousness, and so forth, to make them palpable. Like to point to eye consciousness, make them palpable so they're not just words. Eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body, and don't just think body consciousness or body consciousness. You see, you stick a finger in your eye. If you want to know if the body consciousness is in your eye, stick your finger in your eye. I want to know if your body consciousness is in your tongue. Stick your fingernail. Yeah, it's everywhere. Body consciousness. And these are not just words. So all of these consciousnesses, of course, the consciousness resides there, right? Resides. A little bit. Yesterday I was at a temple, and I was talking, so to speak, with the abbot, and I was indicating we're walking out after a couple hours, and I was saying there's no sound here. It was very quiet. I don't know if you can hear the road is right down there. It's a very busy road. I went like this. So right in the city, very busy place. So, what was I talking about? All of these consciousnesses, all of them, even the non-conceptual, are called conceptual. There's a wider meaning of conceptual. So all of the conceptual consciousnesses and all of the 81 conceptual consciousnesses and the non-conceptual consciousnesses are called conceptual. So they're given the cruddy name conceptual. They all disappear and don't exist. You see, you get a sense of the meaning of don't exist. And all that's there, now, he's going to address this. You might wonder whether if all consciousnesses of the 8 types dissolve and disappear, you're in a state of total unconsciousness. Unconsciousness means duh. However, this is not the case because due to the force of familiarization, now go back to that paragraph. In Gelug, this is called mother and child clear lights meet. The mother clear light is the fundamental innate mind of clear light that's always there, but we haven't recognized it. We don't recognize it. The child clear light, a lot of translators call it the sun clear light. I'll call that wrong. Because here, there's pu and pumo when you make a difference. Son and boy and girl, or pumo, son and daughter, depending on what you're talking about. But then pu, when you don't make a difference, is child. This word that's used for the male one is used for both. If you ask, how many children do you have? Pu-kaseyu. How many children do you have? 10. I have 10. Then you say, Pu-nga tam, pu-mo-nga. I have 5 boys and 5 girls. You wonder how I could have translated so many books, huh? They're in different countries. The 5 boys are in Tahiti and the 5 girls are in, I don't know where they're. I don't want to have to pay to get them married. I'll drink to that. So it's the child clear light. So what's the child clear light? The child clear light is the mental consciousness practicing the clear light. So when the child clear light, the mental consciousness practicing the clear light, recognizes the fundamental innate mind of clear light, opens to that, the child clear light disappears. It's very funny, really, when you follow out the metaphor. When the child clear light meets up with the mother clear light, the child clear light disappears. all that's left is the mother clear light, because the mother clear light's been recognized. So we're just left with the mother. If you want to get silly about it, the mother clear light goes. Oh, there's my kid. That's getting silly, So you see, that's what he's saying here. This mental consciousness that's involved with subject and object, apprehending subject and apprehended object, that disappears. Like that child clear light in Gelu. Same thing, you see the same thing said. Child clear light disappears. And so in Nyingma also, this mentality, which was so important to understand, this is the familiarizer. And then when you get to the point of getting down to the deepest one, then the familiarizer disappears, and you're left with just the intrinsic. You're just left with intrinsic awareness. So the child clear light, or the familiarizer, as he's going to say, disappears. So we'll just read it here. Due to the force of familiarization, you can see in Dzogchen, the path of release, how important the familiarizer, who is operating within apprehended object and apprehending something, how important it is, but then it's going to disappear. Due to the force of familiarization gained from earlier practice, how important that gradual practice is, and you can see it in Patrul Rinpoche's text. He himself says this. At that point, you identify the clear light that is internal manifest enlightenment. And this is recognition of your own face. It's not like you disappear and you're dumbfounded or something like that. This is it says you identify the clear light. You don't disappear. You don't It's not like you're run over by a tractor. Despite my lousy metaphor of a special wisdom, unlike our usual consciousness, dawns. You see something special, unlike our usual consciousness. This internal manifest enlightenment is exemplified by space or sky that is devoid of the three conditions that pollute its natural face. I switched to the word face here, which I think is a very good term that comes out of translations from East Asia that use the word face a lot. Moonlight, I think, that I've said before, is such a good term. Like when you're looking at pictures that include yourself, you look for your own face. Provided you've had a mirror earlier in your life. If you've never had a mirror, you wonder, who the hell is that? I can recognize everybody else, but who's that? It's you, dumbass. No, how could it be? Or in another way, then, this is another way of reading the text, which I think we'll stop right there. The bell rang. Did you hear the bell? Could you hear it? In the next room is a chime. Now, in the next paragraph from Patrul Rinpoche, Patrul Rinpoche, Jigme Chögyömbo. I was wondering if I could say it fast. I can't. Patrul Rinpoche, Jigme Chögyömbo. Jigme Chögyömbo. See, I have to get that one fast. Jigme Chögyömbo. Jigme Chögyömbo. Jigme Chögyömbo. He's going to talk about what happens if you don't have familiarization.